Good morning. This morning, I'm going to do a special reading of a portion of the Red Book by Dr. C.G. Jung. I'll be reading from the Reader's Edition, starting on page 265. And what I'm going to read is a special part of the Red Book, which particularly relates to the shadow, because many of my subscribers who are members who are BTSARMYs have asked me to read something about the shadow. So I'm going to do that this morning without interruption, and then I will come back and I will be responding to some of your chats at the end. But in this part of the Red Book, page 265 of the Reader's Edition, which is found in chapter 6 of the second part of the Red Book, which is called Liber Secundus. And chapter 6 is entitled Death. And so this is Dr. Jung's comment on the shadow for everyone. And Dr. Jung is in an active imagination in which he was comprehending his darkness. And this is what he said. And by the way, this is just before the beginning of World War I. So he was experiencing a lot of anxiety in society at large due to societal shadow. And of course, in our current events, this last 2 weeks, our president has taken the United States to the brink of war with Iran. And so this was a time 100 years ago when Dr. Jung was at the brink of war. Not his country was neutral, but it was, so he was talking about both the collective unconscious shadow and the personal unconscious shadow. When I comprehended my darkness, a truly magnificent night came over me, and my dream plunged me into the depths of the millennia, and from it my phoenix ascended. But what happened to my day? Torches were kindled, bloody anger and disputes erupted. As darkness seized the world, the terrible war arose, and the darkness destroyed the light of the world, since it was incomprehensible to the darkness and good for nothing anymore. And so we had to taste hell. I saw which vices the virtues of this time changed into, how your mildness became hard, your goodness became brutality, your love became hate, and your understanding became madness. Why did you want to comprehend the darkness? But you had to, or else it would have seized you. Happy the man who anticipates this grasp. Did you ever think of the evil in you? Oh, you spoke of it. You mentioned it. You confessed it smilingly as a generally human vice or a recurring misunderstanding. But did you know what evil is, and that it stands precisely right behind your virtues? That it is also your virtues themselves as their inevitable substance? You locked Satan in the abyss for a millennium, and when the millennium had passed, you laughed at him, since he had become a children's fairy tale. But if the dreadful Great One raises his head, the world winces, the most extreme coldness draws near. With horror you see that you are defenseless, and that the army of your vices falls powerless to its knees, while the power of demons, you seize the evil, with the power of demons, you seize the evil, and your virtues cross over to him. You are completely alone in this struggle, since your gods have become deaf. You do not know which devils are greater, your vices or your virtues. But of one thing you are certain, that virtues and vices are brothers. We need the coldness of death to see clearly. Life wants to live and to die, to begin and to end. You are not forced to live eternally, but you can also die, since there is a will in you for both. Life and death must strike a balance in your existence. Today's men need a large slice of death, since too much incorrectness lives in them, and too much correctness died in them. What stays in balance is correct. What disturbs balance is incorrect. But if balance has been attained, then that which preserves it is incorrect, and that which disturbs it is correct. Balance is at once life and death. For the completion of life, a balance with death is fitting. If I accept death, then my tree greens, since dying increases life. If I plunge into the death encompassing the world, then my buds break open. How much our life needs death. Joy at the smallest things comes to you only when you have accepted death. But if you look out greedily for all that you could still live, then nothing is great enough for your pleasure. And the smallest things that continue to surround you are no longer a joy. Therefore I behold death, since it teaches me how to live. If you accept death, it is altogether like a frosty night and an anxious misgiving, but a frosty night in a vineyard full of sweet grapes. You will soon take pleasure in your wealth. Death ripens. One needs death to be able to harvest the fruit. Without death, life would be meaningless, since the long-lasting rises again and denies its own meaning. To be and to enjoy your being, you need death, and limitation enables you to fulfill your being. Okay, so that's the reading I intended to give you. It's a fairly brief one. And let me read a few footnotes here that relate to this. Near the beginning, he says, in 1940, Jung wrote, "Evil is relative, partly avoidable, partly fate. The same goes for virtue, and one often does not know which is worst." And this is from an attempt at a psychological interpretation of the dogma of the Trinity, Collected Works 11, paragraph 291. And another, let's see if I can, okay. So he's talking about Satan, and he said, "You locked Satan in the abyss for a millennium, and when the millennium had passed, you laughed at him, since he had become a children's fairy tale." The footnote reads, in the corrected draft, this sentence is replaced with, "Evil is one half of the world, one of the two pans of the scale." And let's read on here. And this footnote, the text says, well, this is before the next text. The draft continues, "In this bloody battle, death steps up to you, just like today where mass killing and dying fill the world. The coldness of death penetrates you. When I froze to death in my solitude, I saw clearly and saw what was to come, as clearly as I could see the stars and the distant mountains on a frosty night." This is what he was seeing in advance, the collective unconscious seeing the coming of World War I. We need the coldness of death to see clearly. Life wants to live and to die, to begin and to end. And the footnote reads, in Transformation of Symbols of the Libido, volume 6 of the collected works, Jung had argued that the libido was not only a Schopenhauerian life urge, but contained the contrary striving toward death within itself. Collected work B, paragraph 696. Let's see. Life and death must strike a balance in your existence. And the footnote reads, the draft continues, to live what is right and to let what is false die. That is the art of life. In 1934, Jung wrote, life is an energetic process like any other, but every energetic process is in principle irreversible and therefore unequivocally directed toward a goal, and the goal is the state of rest. From the middle of life, only he who is willing to die with life remains living, since what takes place in the secret hour of life's midday is the reversal of the parabola, the birth of death. Not wanting to live is identical with not wanting to die. Becoming and passing away is the same curve. Soul and Death, Collected Works 8, paragraph 800. See The Boundless Expanse, Jung's reflection on life and death. That's a reference to an essay by Sono Shamdasani, who was the editor of the Red Book. And it was published in Quadrant, Journal of the C.G. Jung Foundation for Analytical Psychology, number 38 in 2008, pages 9 through 32. Okay, so I'll take a look at some of your comments here. And Winston's mom says, how goes my Monday? Well, it's going to be a busy day. We have a live group session tonight online, so it will be available for everyone to watch at 8 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, for those of you who might be interested in watching it on YouTube. And if you're a panelist, it will be a live panelist session, and I'll send out the notice of that a little later. Miles Flagg says, Sophie educated me that Star Wars is a dyad of a life star and a death star. Relates to this reading, thoughts? And then he has thoughts. Yes, it relates to this reading, very much so. And there is a dyad going on. Winston's mom. Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings during his hospitalization period after his traumatic injuries in the trenches during World War I. Jung and Tolkien had their own hero's journey, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Well, I don't know if they were one another's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but anyway, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde are definitely two parts of one soul. Mr. Hyde is definitely the shadow in that story. To be or not to be, that is the question, says Winston's mom. One should be careful that another's karma does not run over your own dogma. Absolutely. Fish can't use guns. Winston's mom, teach a man to fish. Absolutely. Winston's mom, 17, watching now. Please hit like for the libido. Thank you, Winston's mom. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the likes that I see on this already. 11 is an angelic number that tells us to be aware of our surroundings. Your surroundings deserve a like, or Skip Conover reading does. Thank you. Thank you from Beta Teka and Winston's mom. 8 p.m. live reading Eastern Time or Greenwich Mean Time. It's U.S. Eastern Time. So that's about it's sorry to say it's about 1 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, Universal Time, UTC. I regret that, but that is the time that we started with in the reading group. And so I do often get a lot of replays overnight for my European subscribers. And I have intentionally, therefore, made the advanced reading group, which meets on Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. I've intentionally made that in my afternoon, which means that it can be viewed all the way from Hawaii to basically Dubai or Saudi Arabia anyway. Um, and Hannah 1 says, has it started now? Well, the reading is complete, so you can hear it on playback. Miles says, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was a movie I saw as a kid, scared the crap out of me at a time when I would put my hands over my eyes watching such things. Old versions are often the best. Yes, that's definitely true. And last night, my wife and I saw the first 5 episodes of the new series entitled Messiah. And I must say the premise of the show is very, very interesting. And we could not stop until we basically dropped. We were so exhausted. But we started to watch episode 1 and we didn't stop for 5 hours. So I'd urge you to take a look at that. And so Oyon, salam alaikum. Let's see, the advanced reading group would be at about 10:30 at night for Abu Dhabi, which is a very active time for many people in the Middle East because it's so hot there that many people that live in the Middle East do some of their most important work in what we would call the middle of the night between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. So anyway, peace. I'm going to my meditation group. This is not because I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Buddhist. That would be my wife, as you can see from her picture on the wall here in my study. I live with a non-ordained Buddhist Lama. She's not Tibetan, she's Caucasian, but she was called to Tibetan Buddhism in 1994, believe it or not, and she completed a 3-year retreat in Tibetan Buddhism. So meanwhile, I was already in the midst of my Jungian studies, and so we have paralleled our studies side by side. And my main reason for going to the meditation group is not only to see how Buddhism is taught, but also because I believe that meditation is one excellent way to get in touch with your self and with your unconscious. And tonight we will be having a very, very interesting discussion on using creativity as a way of connecting with the self. And that will be a discussion of Dr. Carter's essay on Jung the Craftsman, which comes in volume 3 of Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions. And so, anyway, well, says thanks for that about the 5th element. I didn't see. Oh, she said, Winston's mom said, the elements, water, air, earth, fire, and ether, the philosopher's stone, This is represented in the fifth element, spirit, with Carl Jung, called the quintessentia. Yes, certainly spirit is significant, and we must learn where the spirit is going. So, yeah, and so, right, Winston's mom says Abu Dhabi is GMT +4, and I'm currently -5. So that means that at 1:30 in the afternoon, my time is 11 p.m. for any subscribers in Abu Dhabi. I urge you to join us. I have spent a lot of time in that part of the world. I've been to the Emirates, which includes Abu Dhabi, and I've been to Abu Dhabi, but mostly to Dubai, probably about 75 times in my lifetime. So I know something about that part of the world. And I therefore also urge you again to take a look at this series, Messiah. I don't know where it's going, but it's very, very interesting. And it's interesting to see how people are manipulated by their own unconscious. And so anyway, Winston's mom says, "Ura." Well, Ura is right, but I have never been to Abu Dhabi as a Marine, as a matter of fact. I have always been there in business, and my daughter called me up and said one time that her friends had said to her that I worked for a certain group that finds itself in Langley, Virginia, and that's what her friends thought I did because I traveled so much around the world. And the only answer I could give her was, "Well, Natasha, you'll never know." Because if I say it's true, then I could be puffing myself up, or it isn't true. And if I say it's not true, you don't necessarily, you won't necessarily believe me. So that's the personal cross that one who travels broadly has to bear, especially if you're an American. So, okay, Ara, I'm glad you're listening to the ION videos. And one other point for R is that the ION videos stop at about paragraph 104, the ones that are public on this YouTube channel. We then did a full seminar on ION, 32 different sessions, seminar sessions, and those are all available on playback, but they're only available on playback in the advanced reading group. And that is in a Dropbox, which I maintain for the advanced reading group. Winston's mom says she was stationed in Langley for almost 10 years. And, okay. So I'm not going to go into that further orally, but I see what you're saying. And Dagmar says, "Hello, Dagmar, welcome to the reading group." And so anyway, thank you for joining me. I have 25 people on live right now, so that's quite an achievement for early on a Monday morning. And I'm going to excuse myself and go on to my meditation class. I will be trying to connect with myself so that tonight's session at 8 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time will be more meaningful to everyone. So see you then. Peace.